So yeah, so that's sort of the intention, right? So like I said, the goal of today's session is to provide sort of a comprehensive primer on uh, uh, finance and business recruiting careers, starting with investment banking, then going to the buy side and everything in between, is to sort of give everyone tips and advice on how to tackle each step of that process, right? Networking, the story building, the interviewing, then the summer itself, et cetera, as well as sort of broader career like planning. I know, it's an area that comes up a lot when we do these type of events. So yeah, we're excited to also, I think, thank the UVA teams across our different clubs, right? I think it was Tamid, AIF, Smart Women Securities, and a bunch of other clubs on campus. So we're excited to kind of start this relationship with you guys, and like other universities, kind of build it over the course of the next few months and then over the next year. So that's sort of the intention here. Like I said, I'll start with a presentation here. If anyone, feel free to stop me, raise your hands. I think it's always nice to have live questions, even though we're not on live and on Zoom. But if you have questions, you can drop in the chat as well. So let me start with my background. I've been in the industry since 2012. I'm actually originally from the DMV area. I grew up in Maryland, on the other side of the river. And yeah, so I entered this industry back in 2012, where I started at Goldman Sachs. And prior to this, I actually, I got my MBA really early on in my career, and I can go through that if folks have questions around that. But I entered, for all intents, sort of my finance career in 2012. I started at Goldman in our investment banking group. And to take you all a little bit back to sort of post the last financial crisis, I get asked this question a lot, and I think just this spring semester is probably like the 20th or 25th session that we've done on different campuses. And the question I get asked a lot is, hey, how do I pick an industry group, or how do I pick sort of a career that I think I will find really exciting? The advice I think that's worked well for me and all the people that I've been able to sort of mentor over my career is that I think, well, first, you want to pick a career, right? That, look, if you go into banking or consulting or PE, you may or may not be at that firm, right, for the next 10 years or 15 years or whatever. So I think we put this undue pressure upon ourselves to be like, hey, I have to only go to this one or two firms. If not, sort of, I'm going to be really upset or really whatever about myself. I think the key is to find the right career to start off with that's, reflective of what it is that you want to learn out of it. What are the skills that you want to build out of it? What are the types of experiences you want to get? What are the types of people that you want to work with? And what are the types of sort of projects and skills, actually tangible skill sets that you're building, right? So, for those reasons, I encourage all of our underclassmen here who are not already going through recruiting to give really strong thought to learning about all these different career options. Obviously, being part of the business school, the McIntyre School, et cetera, you have sort of access to consulting or banking or hedge funds or private equity, et cetera. Make sure you sort of have a good understanding of why you're getting into some of this careers you're getting into. So I'll come back to that. The second thing that I get asked a lot about is, okay, now that I know I'm going to banking or private equity or venture capital or whatever, how do I pick, like, what industry groups should I get into? Should it be healthcare? Should it be technology? Should it be TMT? Should it be FIG or whatever? And my advice on that one, I started my career at FIG, so financial services, financial institutions group, and ended up, when I was working there, leading 3 of the largest deals that we did in FIG, right, since the crisis. So obviously things worked out really well for me, but I didn't know that, right? We don't know that per se. So my advice to anyone who's looking at industry groups and trying to make a differentiation, we are going to a world that is more industry focused. So it is helpful to go into industries that is actually pertinent to what you want to do in your career. Not that there's anything wrong with being a generalist or whatever early on in your career, but for me, it was 2 things. One is picking an industry that I was excited about. So financial services, coming out of the last financial crisis, and even today, is like 50% of the S&P, right? So it's an industry that's going to be huge, that's going to be market changing, and it's going to be, at the end of the day, impacting the lives of every single individual in the world. So that's why I kind of picked financial services, end up panning out, right? So we did credit card deals, payments deals, especially finance deals, et cetera. And then number 2, so one that you think is personally interesting to you. And number 2, one that has tremendous room for growth, right? So for me, coming out of the financial crisis, financial services was one where there was tremendous disruption, tremendous growth, and it ended up bearing out like that. So if folks have questions about specific industry groups, I'm happy to cover it, but that's some general advice. So after spending, a couple of requisite years in banking, I actually transitioned to private equity. I joined Goldman's own private equity fund. Before some reorgs, we have a huge private equity business that's been around for a while, for forever. We kind of about $100 billion of AUM in sort of mega fund, mega cap deals. And so that was really transformative as far as my experience goes. The transition from banking to PE was really, really challenging. And I'll get into that if we have time on kind of how to do that well. So was vice president at Goldman that whole time in private equity. And then I got the opportunity, kind of recruited in sort of before even 30, to go be a director at another fund and sort of build out that franchise. And look, the one thing I learned from there is like tremendous opportunities come to you if you're sort of put yourself in positions to to build some of those relationships that you need in the overall industry and kind of build your own networks throughout your career. And you will see a lot of great opportunities will come about. And then it's on you to figure out when is the right time to make a jump to something else, right? So I think it's really, really important about career transitioning. We're not going to get into this here as much since there's so much sort of, undergraduate crowd, but just something else I'd point to. Also at GS, took on a bunch of leadership roles. I was chief of staff in FIG, in our investment banking group, led analyst associate recruiting and summer and promotion committees, et cetera. So anyway, we'll cover all those things. Just on Elevate, I'd point out, and the reason why the UVA team had reached out to us to do this is we are partnered with, hang on, I think this will come up. We are partnered with, just wait, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so we're partnered with, UVA is on this list now, but we're partnered with all the top 30 universities on the undergrad level and all the top 12 MBAs on the MBA level. And we work with sort of 4 or 5 of all of their largest sort of finance firms, et cetera. And given UVA's interest in sort of, in these careers and also track record, I think it just sort of naturally makes sense to partner up with you guys as well. It's the largest network. I founded this in 2019, but it's now become the largest network for investment banking, private equity, hedge fund, venture capital careers, and growth equity for both professionals and students in North America. The key is we're 100% built by pros, right? So kind of the networking, the learning, the recruiting, the investing, all those things have that focus from professionals and firms themselves. You'll get more info on the networking platform, on the recruitment platform, and all that stuff. I'll hit on that in 1 second. Just, I think, take advantage of the resources. Obviously, you'll be joining, 100 other clubs across all the top 35 universities on the platform. We are partnered with a lot of the top firms. And just give you some examples. I think, in private equity, in bulge bracket investment banking, and boutique investment banking. These are just some examples: growth equity, asset management, MBAs, family offices, et cetera. So just for anyone on this call that's interested, we are going to have a recruiting event with JP Morgan in 2 weeks. So I'll send that to you, Manas. You can facilitate the group, or make sure you've signed up for this group, for this event online. So then we'll have your email. We share that with you guys. We're having a recruiting event for LionTree, which is one of the top boutiques in sort of TMT investment banking and just more broadly in general. That's also in a couple of weeks. We're having a session with TCV, which is one of the top growth equity funds, this Saturday. So just get involved. I think the best way to learn and sort of express interest in these careers and actually be considered is to sort of be considered, right? Kind of being present and aware of these things, right? So because recruiting is very, very fast and happens quick. Okay, I'll keep going on this. These are just examples of other firms and professionals we've had on. These are examples of, hold on, my screen's like going crazy here. Examples of events that we've had recently. Obviously, we're gonna have way more of these going forward. You're all invited to those if, up to capacity, I suppose. So definitely get involved. These are just some things I'll point to. One thing I will point to that has been like overutilized by our partner clubs is the advice database that we have. So let me just point that to you. I think it's an amazing resource that, we want to share with all of our students here. So this is the advice database, and I think you guys will benefit from it a lot. But if you look here, we have over 500 videos. These are completely free for our partner club. So if you go in, we have about 500 videos that you can just say, hey, I'm really interested in, I don't know, growth equity, right? So you can go here. Let's say you're interested in Warburg Pincus. You can go here. All right, what is the interview process like here? What are the skills that they're looking for? Again, so I'm just giving an example, but the point is you can go in and say, hey, I'm really interested in, I don't know, I'm interviewing for Goldman Sachs. So let me confirm that. And we have literally 14 times 9 pages of people who worked at Goldman and sort of how do you become a better analyst at Goldman? What are the differences between summer and full-time at Goldman, right? Things like that, which I think has really helped our students get better awareness into sort of interviewing for jobs or, considering these jobs before even they go in an interview or go and really substitute a lot of the information gaps that we have. Okay, I have a question about the full-time time. Okay, I will address these. These are like specific to certain firms. And so if I don't get to there's a KKR related question. So I will try to get to them here, but if not, you guys can reach out afterwards. I'll try to, connect you to the right person on our team. This is my LinkedIn for anyone that wants to connect, feel free to. And then here's our Elevate stuff. So this is kind of just for people to kind of get familiar with the program, et cetera. So let's keep moving here. You can keep sending your questions to me or to the audience. I will promise I'll take them in a few minutes. Manas, is this audience like a lot of them already recruiting, or are they like in the exploratory phase?
I'd say it's split about evenly. I'd say probably a good 20, 22 of them. They're second years right now. And honestly, it's probably a little higher than that. So I'd say it's closer to about like 2 to 1 to even 3 to 1 second to first year. So recruiting.
Okay. All right. So we're going to skip some of the initial stuff. Again, I look to you all, like we do this all the time at all these universities, but like, let me know if some things like, hey, I need more info into this, or I need like, it's just hard to do that when, we don't see a lot of faces and we're not in person. Right. So just try to be, try to like guide it so that you guys can benefit from this. So, I'm going to just buzz through these. I think the 5 biggest areas that we see people going into, obviously banking, private investing. So private equity, private credit, growth equity, venture capital, which is probably the highest growth area that we've been seeing in the last couple of years, and then public investing, and then consulting. So again, I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail. If you're really interested, these are all the firms and professionals that we've had on in different capacities. So you're welcome to go on the website and hear from, if you're really into consulting, go hear from McKinsey or whatever that's on there, and you can sort of understand. Is there any way to get here? Okay. Yep, I'll get to that question in a second. But generally, I think the reason why a lot of people are invested in investment banking or consulting right out of undergrad, and to an extent investment banking for this group here, is because it preserves a lot of the optionality that you all have when you look at sort of things that you want to do with your careers. Still, right, investment banking does seem like it gives you a full complement of skill set as it relates to business acumen, technical skills, client management skills, deal experience, and sort of high pressure, high intensity environments that will then help you, right? Whether you want to go into PE later, or you want to go into venture capital, or you want to go into, other things, entrepreneurship and so on, or even business school. It seems like it sort of checks a lot of those boxes. Again, I don't think you should do banking just to go get an exit. Like, I don't think that's like a fair way to think about it. You should absolutely go into it being like, sometimes you could argue that the work that our bankers are doing is way more exciting than the work that some of our PE people are doing, because it's just different. So I would just keep an open mind with all these careers. Make sure you sort of don't just go in to just go to the next thing, right? So that's sort of one thing I'll say. Private equity, I'd say about 25 to 35% of our audience goes into PE. I'd say about 50% of our audience goes into banking. 25 to 35% goes into PE. It's been higher recently, obviously, just because more firms have programs that obviously we advertise and work with them on. But I think a lot more firms are having analyst programs. I think just make sure for you that you understand the trade-off of going into buy side versus investment banking right out of undergrad, mainly around skill building, kind of market perception of it, and sort of the actual experiential learning that you'll be getting. So it's really, really important. I don't think all buy side options are created the same. In fact, I still think if from our audience, most people go into banking, even if they have offers for both, right? So just something to think about on that perspective. Growth equity, venture capital. Again, growth equity, I think, is the hottest career that I've seen in the last 3 years, in terms of our audience. A lot of our programs, right? A lot of our mega funds have growth funds now that they recruit for. And so it's just something for you all to think about. Obviously, if you're at all interested in growth equity, private equity, you should be at the Saturday event with TCV, which is one of the top growth equity firms. But it's really like funding. If you think about where a lot of the activity is going on in the markets now, a lot of companies are staying private a lot longer, right? So the private equity activity has gone to be a little bit lesser because of that. Valuations are astronomical. So you kind of go in, and the old PE playbook of getting multiple expansion is not exactly present in today's market. And then thirdly, so much of this growth is being driven by technology, right? In every single industry, and in technologies where there's kind of the immense potential for return, right? So if you're waiting for a company to become public, you probably missed the high return potential, right? If you're sort of an investor, right? So as a result of that, we're seeing a ton of growth funds come out, a ton of growth equity opportunities, which is investing in companies from Series D up till sort of IPO. Again, just something to think about. There's a lot fewer opportunities at the undergrad level, but just something to think out there. If you find sort of a good role for you, I think that's really important. And then obviously public investing, I'm not going to touch on that as much. That's the hedge fund world. And then consulting, I'm not going to touch on that as much. If you're interested, you can go listen to the Citadel, McKinsey, and some of these other sessions that we've had. I'm going to skip this section as well. This was more for a broader audience, but if you're a sophomore, and if you guys tell me that there's 75% of you are sophomores, you're obviously already in the recruiting interviewing phase. So just jumping to recruiting, to me, it's 5 things, right, that stand out when I think about, the next couple sections are all about keys to success in the recruiting process. There's 5 pieces to the recruiting puzzle, right? So what are the keys for you all going from just an application to getting an interview and then an offer, right? So what are those things like? So to me, there's 5, right? So one is the university that you go to. So obviously UVA, fantastic university, great track record into the street, but I would say not all banks have a tremendous amount of alumni. Not all banks have like a huge recruitment team that might focus on UVA, et cetera. So I think your strategy based on that should be obviously focused around if a bank has a tremendous track record of taking from UVA and or you have a focused recruiting team, you should be focused on getting on their list and making a good impression. However, and if they come to campus, obviously, if they don't come to campus, then you're out here sort of recruiting into the ether, right? So you're now trying to find anyone at the firm that will connect you and make those sort of connections. So your strategy obviously is going to change based on if a bank or firm is coming to UVA or not, or has a recruiting team or not. Number 2, another thing you need to focus on, obviously for my second years or third years, this is a little bit harder to change because recruiting is happening right now. But a lot of banks do have GPA cutoffs, right? People look at sort of majors and et cetera. So to me, it's not as much, is there anything you can do over the next 2 weeks to improve your GPA? It's way more about how do you explain, like, why did you take this major? Like, how rigorous is it? What are you actually getting to do? How is that going to impact you going into banking or PE? And that's what I want to get out of some of those discussions. Again, we'll get back to the interviews in a second. The third is internship experience or resume building. Like I said, we did this at Duke last night. We did it at Princeton the night before, and so on. And we're doing it at Georgetown tomorrow. And every time I do these sessions, we sort of ask our second years, how many of you have internships for this summer yet? And it usually ends up being about 60% do and about 40% don't. So for the 60% of the audience that has internships for this summer already, if you're a second year, great. Your job in the interview is to explain why you got that internship and how that's going to help you in the banking or PE process that you're heading into. For my 40% or whatever the number is of the people that don't have internships yet, I would dedicate about 25 to 30% of your time now trying to line up an internship over the next few months, such that you can, or the next few weeks, so that you can talk about it at your interviews. Worst case, you just say, hey, I'm still recruiting, but I have a few sort of, very strong sort of potential opportunities in X, Y, and Z space. And I'm recruiting primarily into private equity or banking for X, Y, and Z reasons. So again, depending on where you are, answer a question in a way that sort of shows growth from what you did last summer to now what you're going to do this summer or planning to do this summer, and then how those 2 experiences are going to get you to become a great candidate for banking or private equity. So that's kind of how I think about that kind of experience building, laddering, et cetera. So the relevance is really important. Networking, I think I could spend an hour on networking with you all and probably still not get into it. We had on Goldman a couple of weeks ago to go over a full networking session. So for anyone who caught that, that's great. But I think, I think my views on networking is as follows, right? So you have to sort of, 1, put in the work. Number 2, you have to sort of be okay with failure. And number 3, you sort of have to be a little bit open to like luck and chance, right? And so what I mean by that, right? So why do we ask you guys all to network in this process? And the reason is, right, for any given firm, let's take UVA or any of these great universities, we will get, I don't know, like 400, oh no, not 400 is too many, but maybe like 200 resumes, right, for any given school. And so how do we go from that 200, 300 down to, 20 or 30 hire views or whatever we can give out, right? Or 50 hire views per university or per event. And largely it has to do with university, academic performance, internship experience, and then obviously networking, right? Which of these people has anyone on the team met? And what impression have they made? And is he or she someone we want to work with on the team? So, on all the 50-50 calls, it goes to people who've been networking. And your goal in networking really is to build 1 or 2 relationships strong at any given bank that will go then pound the table and say, hey, I know Manas, he's reached out to me over recruiting, really, made a solid impression, had a good call, and I think we should include him on our list, right? So that's kind of how the process works behind the scenes. Again, if you haven't done that or haven't done that a lot, just start getting in the habit, because it's not just for banking recruiting, it's like a career long skill, right? Guess what? All my bankers now are doing for PE, the same exact thing. Like, guess what all my PE people are doing for the next thing. So it's sort of like networking is something you'll be carrying on through the rest of your career. So it's just an important skill. And then, like I said earlier, being okay with failure. I'll get into networking in a second if we want to double click on that. But you might send out 100 emails. You may only get back 10 responses. And I think being okay with the level of failure or success, obviously we have to think about how to maximize that success rate. And I'll share some of those tips around that. But you have to sort of get at it and kind of do it very consistently over a period of time. We'll come back to networking if folks have questions. And then finally, interviewing. I will spend a couple pages on interviewing, but I think, you do all this work and then you get to an informational interview. And then the key is like, how do we make a good impression and how do we not bomb that interview? The key is really storytelling, and the key is connection with the person you're talking to. Obviously, if you're in a higher view and you're talking to a camera, it's a little bit different, but pretend there is a person on the other side and you're talking to a person. And then obviously there's a behavioral fit component, situational component, and then a technical component. What are firms looking for? Look, I think as we ask all our firms, kind of what are we looking for? And myself, right, when I'm doing recruiting, it's 8 or 9 things. And this is a combination of all the things that will be proven out either by a resume or your experiences on your interview. Analytical ability, right? Can you solve complex problems that you're going to be working on, where you're working with a lot of ambiguous data or information or people, right? And how do you do that? Technical quantitative exposure. Again, you don't have to have had an internship in finance. You have to demonstrate that, hey, I have the ability to do this from an analytical perspective and a technical quantitative perspective. So we ask for that. Teamwork, leadership, really, really important. Because look, any given time when you're working in banking or PE, you're the sole analyst with 4 or 5 senior people on a team, right? So how is this individual managing that whole process? How are they working as part of the team, but also how are they being a self-starter? Because every day you're going to be doing something completely different than the day before, right? So it's sort of the intensity of the job is pretty high. Character, I think really important. And we ask a lot of situational questions, right? So, a client calls you at 5 p.m. and your VP is, in the Hamptons, and then your associate is, God knows where. What would you do? Like, would you send them the model? It hasn't been checked by the client or by the VP. Like, how would you handle this? So a lot of things we're testing, like how do you deal with challenges? How do you deal with new situations in these interviews? And we really want to know, right? How would you deal with that? And that's the judgment character aspect of it. Interest in finance. Look, I think that's important. Even if you aren't a finance major or a business major or economics major, being part of these clubs, right? Hey, I'm part of Smart Women, I'm part of Timid, or I'm part of, the other groups that you guys have. Really important. Interest in markets. The best thing I would do for this is today, just subscribe to DealBook and just read it 10 minutes a day. And then by the time your interviews come, hopefully you will have learned some market related stuff. Curiosity about businesses. Sometimes we'd ask you like, hey, if you're advising this company, what types of, what do you think about their business model or something like that? So it's kind of, you should sort of flex some of those muscles as well, and communication as well. What would be okay, cool. The question here was, okay. So there's a couple of questions. What would be the appropriate answer to that question? Which question was that? By the way, I don't remember what question, but just ping me and I'll answer that. Resume building. Look, I'll just spend a minute on this. I'm sure the McIntyre School and the Career Center have spent a lot of time with you guys on getting your investment banking resumes ready. It's not like a traditional resume, right? It's really important to focus on actions and results, right? As opposed to situations. So when I look at a resume, right, when we get a resume book, what I instruct our analysts, or what our analysts end up doing, is probably spend, we're physically not able to spend more than 90 seconds, right, on a resume, just given if we have 200 resumes, that already is like, 5 or 6 hours. So, if you're going to spend 60 seconds, 90 seconds on a resume, you're just focused on sort of candidate, where they're, kind of what is their academic background, and they're really focused on the left side of the page, right? So what is their internships like? What are the quality of their experiences? And then what they've actually done. So try to make each bullet really, really, really strong, action oriented. And then don't put in like, yes, you could put in 3 or 4 experiences, but don't put in like 100, like 7 experiences and just put 1 bullet each. It sort of shows a little bit of, lack of depth. So just be really cognizant about how you present your experiences and how much depth and focus that you do it, and then be able to explain everything in the interview, right? I've had people pick like the 2nd bullet or the 3rd bullet of my last piece, or ask them about it, and you should be, or my last bullet on the experience piece, and asked about it. So you all should be prepared to sort of answer those questions as well. Again, if there's specific questions on resumes, I can take them as well. Networking, I'll hit. So the question was sending them out. Okay. Yeah. That's a good question. So the question, the person who just chatted said, what would your response be for that question? Look, I think there's multiple things you could say. So if the question was asked, right, hey, there's a VP that your VPs are not around and the client model, which has happened to me plenty of times. I would say, look, I would try to understand what the first of all, obviously client is at the end of the day, like who we're trying to, they're a client at the end of the day. So we have to sort of be responsive to their needs. I would first try to understand their deadlines and their timings, kind of what are the most important things that they're solving for, and sort of why they need this deliver right now. I would also let them know that, hey, I want to, it's still in draft mode. It's not quite ready yet. So I want to share it with our team and make sure sort of everyone's looked at it, and sort of say, hey, if you kind of give me over the next day or so over the weekend, I'll make sure I'll kind of get it done and get it to you. At the same time, I'd probably email my VP and say, hey, the clients asked for this. Seems like they need it urgently. Do you have any advice? They'll usually come back to you with something. Or if the client keeps pushing you on it, you just say, hey, look, if you really want it and there's no other way to do it, just email your VP or email the client saying, hey, as discussed, this is highly draft mode, has not been discussed, here you go. But you have to use your judgment, right? If it's something that's super sensitive, you probably say, no, I can't share it without my VP looking at it. If it's something the clients looked at before and it's just a version update, then you could probably send it and it's okay. So I just try to get to the bottom of, look, I want to understand what is the constraints in the situation. I want to be responsive to both the client and our team without doing anything that would be sort of incorrect. And then I'd want to communicate across all parties and make sure everyone is completely aware of sort of what's going on, and then give people plenty of time to sort of react, right? So that's how I would react to that question for the person you asked. Okay, all these people that are direct messaging me, do you want to ask these questions live? Because I think that would be interesting for the audience to hear. If not, I can take these and just read them off. I feel like a little bit like I would just have spoken for an hour, and so if you feel like you should ask them, I would love to take them. Okay, so I guess well, those people. Wait, there's another question here. Is there another way to get into PE besides starting as an investment banker? Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think first sort of figure out why you want to get into PE and what types of PE. There's a slide in here later about, I think I talk about how to do the buy side framework. If we get to it, I'll get to it. If we have time, I'll get to it. But private equity is obviously huge, right? So there's sort of the mega funds, and there's sort of the upper middle market funds, and there's middle market funds, and there's growth equity, and then there's other stuff. So try to figure out sort of what your goal is. Generally, if you're looking at sort of a mega fund or a large fund, the most tried and true path tends to be investment banking. That said, a lot of mega funds, right, for a lot of their growth roles do take 40% of their analysts from like consulting or corporate strategy or some, entrepreneurship or startups and things like that. So it's definitely an option. And the reason why private equity from just an LBO, pure private equity, pure play leverage buyout perspective takes banking is just because you've done like 10 deals in banking right before you go into private equity. And it's just sort of giving you a lot of reps around doing the technical analysis of the work. That'll be second nature. Again, there's other ways. We have plenty of people that go into PE not having done banking, but they have sort of particular stories and sort of things that they do. It's just more of a tried and true path. So that's for the question that asked that question. There's a couple other specific questions, which I'll get to in a second. So I guess we can keep moving on the slides. Manas, is there anything from the audience that you want me to address at this point? No.
Are they DMing them to you? Because I don't see them in the general chat.
Yeah, they're just direct messaging, I guess, me here. So it's totally fine. I'm happy to do it. I just prefer if people sort of ask them live, just to keep the thing interactive. But if not, that's completely fine too. So
yeah, everybody, please, like, if you have questions, like either raise your hand, or if we're not talking, just like unmute and ask questions. I think it'd be better and make it more totally interactive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So okay, so let's keep going. Like I said, I think this session is for you all. I'm not here in a recruiting capacity. I will be on these platforms in a recruiting capacity and other events, but today it's more of an informational capacity. So definitely, if there's things you're stuck on, like, hey, I'm not getting any email responses, or like, I got this interview question that I don't know how to answer, or how do I kind of maximize my thing here? I'm happy to sort of deal with those as well. So, all right, so let's keep it moving on the slides. so networking is the next area. So maybe I'll pause here and sort of say, how many people here are like, maybe you could just raise your hands, or even anecdotally, like, are you guys like sailing through networking, or is it like, is there issues that are coming up? So what are sort of some of the things that you all are facing as you go through the networking process for banking or PE or growth? Yes, Harry. Thank you.
Yeah, just getting like opens and responses. People say like, get LinkedIn Premium as like a thing that will help. I don't really know, but like, it's just like crafting a good email that one sounds thoughtful, but yet also getting that volume out.
Yeah, it's a good question, Harry. Look, I think LinkedIn Premium, I would just be very wary of, I think LinkedIn Premium is slightly an exception, but just be wary of like a ton of like paid reasons. Like you could do all this stuff on your own merit and whatever. If you feel like you need more help, absolutely go get it. But part of the reason why even I created Elevate is because I think there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there that I don't think needs to be behind shrouded walls, right? It just sort of needs to be like a lack of transparency, right, in our industry, and sort of what needs to happen. So I'd just be a little bit wary in general of a lot of like paid stuff. Again, training or something could be worth it, but generally, I don't think you need it. You'd be successful. As it relates to networking, I'll get to the LinkedIn Premium is sort of a niche question, but I'll get to the crux of your question here, Harry. To me, networking, there's sort of 3 phases of networking, right? The first phase is, or maybe 4. The first phase is what I sort of call is personal organization around the process, right? So that's what you're talking about here. It can be really intimidating, especially as processes have kicked off, right? You're like, feel like you're just running into a lot of issues. You're like, oh, I'm not operating fast enough that I can't be in these processes, right? So had I spoken to you all like 2 months ago, then, or even in the fall, I would have said, start networking now, because the last, like the sort of the least optimal time to networking is like when the application's open, because everyone is going to be networking at that point, right? And trying to get in front of people. So I would, obviously, if you haven't done it a lot already, I think you'd start now. The first is organization, right? So take a spreadsheet, and for every single bank that is on the street, or I assume this is a banking question, but if it's PE, we could also add PE, just substitute bank for PE, and just make a list at the beginning of like, I would start with honestly first years or even seniors, right? Going to that bank, and just make a list. And I've seen lists of our students like that have like 30 to 50 people in one sheet for a firm. I've seen lists that are 5 to 10, right? So whatever you're comfortable with. Again, it doesn't have to be, one or the other, but just start with your most like common connections. So start with UVA. And the great thing about UVA is you also have Darden, which I work with Darden, and we send a lot, like the top 3 firms that we send out of Darden is Morgan Stanley, Goldman, and I think JP. So my point is there's enough Darden alums at a lot of these banks that will also sort of, be a point of network, right? So I mean, UVA network, I think, to be honest, is lower in numbers, but I think stronger in like power of like, if people like you, they'll pull you through the process, unlike some of my other like, quote target schools, but it is lower in numbers. So you may be reaching out to the same people that everyone else is reaching out to, right? So it's just kind of the virtue of that. So the first thing is organization. Be very organized, right? Make rows and columns or whatever that says, what's the name, what's their title, what's the connection, UVA connection, personal family connection, like random LinkedIn requests, like whatever the connection is, like what's the connection, then data first outreach, response or data follow-up, and then sort of, if you had a call, like who did you have a call with, and write notes about like what you had a call with. So I think being very organized and almost like religiously daily going through that list and adding more people, you should be probably I think you'll start slow, but your cadence should be like adding something like 15 to 20 people every week on that list. I don't care how you do it. Like it could be UVA alums, it could be UVA alums that are, MDs and partners, like it doesn't matter. It's like now is sort of your chance to take a chance, right, at this thing. So I would just say, just be very creative and be very expansive in that outreach. Again, if I'm adding in UVA senior alums, so first start with class of 2022 to class of 2019, and then expand to sort of 18 to and above, then go to UVA Darden alums. And within that, guarantee you could fill 8 to 10 names for each bank, right? I think that would be very doable. So that's the first piece around organization. The second piece of networking, which is important, is around like messaging, right? And communication, right? So like Harry, now you have 10 emails from JP Morgan, right? So great. So where do you start now? So I think, I see too many emails that say something like, hey, I'm putting you on the spot here, but my point is like, hey, I'm Harry, I'm a second year at UVA. I noticed you went to UVA as well, and now are at Goldman Sachs. Like, I would love to learn more, about GS, blah, blah, blah. And, would love to have some time. So I think that's a very weak email for several reasons. But what I want your emails to say is, hey, I'm Harry. I'm part of, what club are you a part of, Harry, amongst these various clubs that are here today?
I'm actually not in like I'm in Virginia Consulting Group and
Fine,
BFI.
whatever. So fine. If you're not in a finance club, that's totally fine. I think you just need to sort of give them a reason to respond to your email, right? So that could include, hey, I'm Harry. At UVA, I'm studying X, Y, and Z, and I'm part of this sort of, consulting program where we advise companies on sort of strategies. I don't know what you do, but whatever you do on strategy solutions or et cetera. Last summer, I interned at X, Y, and Z. If you did or you did not, both of these experiences have really reinforced my interest in investment banking. I noticed you were at UVA and now at Goldman. Like, I would love it if you, I know you're really busy. I'd love it if you have 5-10 minutes to get on the phone and just chat me through your experience, as well as kind of transitioning from UVA into banking. I'm going through the recruitment process now. So something like that. And then even end with saying, hey, if you have, would love, I'm generally free. So if you can suggest, a few windows over the next week or so, I'd love to sort of, get on the phone and talk to you. So you have to sort of give them a reason to respond to you, right, Harry? Because I think what happens is, like, we'll leave a university recruiting event and then I'll get in, the car to the airport or something or whatever, or out off the Zoom. And then we'll get, 50 LinkedIn requests and half of them don't have a message. My point to you is, if you're on a networking event or if you're on some event, please, please, please spend that extra 5 seconds to write a message out saying, hey, thank you so much for coming to UVA for the Goldman event. Like, I really learned X, Y, and Z from you. Like, would be awesome to like get on the phone or something. Like, that is one of the warmest ways to connect. And I'm not kidding you. The number of LinkedIn emails requests I would have received from my career that literally are just LinkedIn emails or invites and like not anything. I'm like, where did this I have no idea where I met this person. Like, this is a great week, right? We spoke at Princeton, then Duke, then UVA and Georgetown. Like, I have no idea where I meet these people, right? So my point is, just use every opportunity to get in front of people, and don't feel like, obviously don't be too aggressive, but don't feel sheepish to kind of get in front of people, because these are all just opportunities, right, for success. So my point is, in your communication, make it strong enough that someone will want to respond to you. Okay, so not just very dreary, like I'm at UVA and I noticed you're UVA alum, blah blah blah, but tell me why I should respond to Harry's email. Like, this is what I've been doing, or I'm involved in this, or I'm really involved in band, or I'm involved in soccer, or I'm involved in this. And like, that's really taught me a lot of the teamwork skills. That is the reason why I'm interested in banking. Or consulting has taught me like the client-based and project management and sort of, or client-based and business strategy skills for banking. And that's why I'm interested, or whatever. So give them a little bit of that and then say, hey, I'd love to sort of get on the phone. So, and then kind of find a formula that works for you, right? You're just not going to know what resonates with people until you start trying. So don't try to have the perfect email. Obviously, spend time on each email. What I don't want you all to doing is just copy and paste every email, just changing the name of the firm. I think that's not a good idea, but just don't feel like you need a perfect email or something to go out to people. Just go and sort of try to connect. Every week though, evaluate, is this strategy working? Like, how many people are responding to me? So either my outreach strategy is broken or my communication strategy is broken, or both, right? So you sort of have to fix it on the fly to make sure you're getting responses. Look, I think average response rates should be anywhere from 20% to 40% as it relates to UVA alums, right? Like that's what I would consider. Like 40 is like really good, 40 to 50 is really good, 20 to 30 is sort of okay. If you're getting under 10, that means like something's off, right? Either in your message or in your sort of communication. The third thing is follow up, right? So I think the follow-up rates that we've seen across the platform, like, it's literally 3x like the response rate people get when people actually follow up on the emails, right? So there's so many reasons why we don't respond to you right away. One is that after UVA, I would have gotten like, 50 LinkedIn requests and I don't have time to follow up on all of them. Or, I'm really busy on a deal. I've just spent an hour with you guys and I have to get back to work and kind of do this other stuff. So there's several reasons why it might be hard for a professional to respond to you guys. But I think where people really like fall short is they don't follow up. They're like, oh, this person, like, I'm like really nervous about following up. Like, don't be nervous. Like, they weren't going to respond to your email anyway, right? If you hadn't followed up. So just follow up. Like, there's no problem, right? So just follow up. And then the fourth way where I think people really sort of fall short is in the actual meeting, right? So let's say you put in all this work, Harry, and get the call. Like, I've seen so many people get on a call and just sort of not have an agenda, not have questions that they want to ask, not be engaged and ask follow-up questions and things like that, which really, like, that is an interview, right? At the end of the day, when you get on these informationals, try to sort of get them to like you, get them to think you're really, really competent, and then get them to sort of be an advocate for you through the process. And so those are, to me, the 4 steps of networking, right? So one is the organization, one is the outreach communication, one is the follow-up, and then the other one obviously is the actual meeting itself. So those are some of my thoughts on networking. I'm sure that I did get a lot of DMs here on networking. So I think I was trying to answer a lot of like everyone's concerns around networking as it comes to this. So Harry, is that helpful?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome. Okay, let's keep going on this.
Hey, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Could I just ask a quick question?
Of course. Yep.
So one of the things I realized with networking is a lot of the common answers are culture, right? A lot of people talk about specific culture in a firm, whether it be one bank or another. And that made me wonder, how important is, I would say, like the idea of loyalty? Because I know Wall Street, like you said, people know people. It's not like a huge place. Is it important to really, develop your relationship with one firm, or just, especially at our level, is it okay to like be exploring and have internships at multiple places?
Okay, good question. Saidi, thank you for that question. Can I just ask a follow-up? Like, do you mean like in the recruiting process, or do you mean like what is the hypothetical? Not you, but what is the hypothetical here? Is that like an individual is like recruiting for 5 different firms at the same time, or is the hypothetical that you have an offer and then you can, or that individual continues to recruit other places?
I would say more so of the second one, and especially
okay.
like, say I work for, I know certain firms like Morgan Stanley, for example, they do take second-year interns.
Yeah.
And say maybe in my 3rd year I want to work for somewhere else.
Yeah.
How does that?
So look, I think, okay, so I'll answer both these questions. So I think it's a good question. I usually get this question asked a lot. So in a month, we're going to do this panel with all of my incoming bankers on like how to be successful for your summer. So this is for my juniors, not for you guys as much. Maybe next year this is for you all, but now it's all of my juniors who are going into their summer internship. And the question we get asked a lot there is like, hey, I'm going to be interning at X, Y, and Z Investment Bank, but I also want to sort of, get a lateral offer at the end of the summer, or, I want to go into PE after. So how do I navigate the process? So we'll cover this in a lot of detail with that process as well. Frankly, if anyone came to the recruiting event, our diversity event a couple of weeks ago, we had 3 of our panelists who were at GS, Evercore, and Morgan Stanley, I think, are now going into the buy side, I think to KKR and 2 other firms. So we covered it there as well. So I'm sure there's a video of that somewhere. So you can address that as well on that topic. But my point is there's 2 things here going on. So the first part of your question was around, how much loyalty should I wouldn't call it loyalty. I would kind of call it like, how much optionality should you sort of have in the sort of recruiting process? Look, I think at the end of the day, if you're recruiting right now, you should absolutely be talking to every single firm you possibly can, right? So whatever way it is. And look, part of it isn't just a selfish motive to be like, oh, I'm using this firm against the other. I think the part of it's just, I think you're in a unique position to be, in sort of to be a market taker, right? In some sense, or market maker in this sense. And so you don't even know yet. So if you had kind of completely considered off like private equity, but you once you start learning more about it, you're interested in it, you should, it's absolutely an option you should have. Similarly in banking, I think a lot of people get really enamored by 1 or 2 banks and they say, oh my God, I'm having like great traction at these 2 banks. Like they're responding to a couple of my emails, it's all great. And then guess what happens? That they're so focused on those 1 or 2 banks, and like both of those super days, for some reason, other candidates just do really well and they get no offers, right? From both of them, they're now stuck. Oh, I wish I had diversified and gotten more sort of thing. So assume that the hit rate of any bank, especially the top 5 or 6, is like at any given thing, even though in your mind, it might seem like you're the best candidate, no, not you, but anyone might be like the best candidate in the world. It's literally is sub 15 to 10%, right? Even if you are like on their list or something. So for that reason, inherently, I would diversify. So I would talk to as many people as possible, because it's like, you just don't know when it's going to happen. Now, the second point around, look, if you have an offer already and if an individual has an offer or whatever, look, I think I think one has to be more like thoughtful around that and sort of figure out what is the level of commitment and sort of what is the level of optionality. Look, we have plenty of people just by virtue of how recruiting works, like certain boutique banks go first, and then like our bulge brackets go, and then sort of some of the other boutiques and some of the other guys, other firms go. So by virtue of that, if you really wanted to go work at, I don't know, Morgan Stanley or something, but you have an offer from somewhere else and that's your top bank, look, I think you can make a case that I like this group more or this culture more or whatever, and recruit for that. Generally, if it's from a sophomore to a junior, I'm less concerned about that because most of our I'd say about 70% of our sophomores, unless it's like 3 or 4 banks, end up going to a different bank for their junior summer. So it's not like you're breaking any rules or anything like that. Unless you sort of like, if that's the case, they only recruit for a handful of banks. Like they're not out recruiting for every single bank, but they're recruiting only for a select group of people that are out there. So I would do it very kind of tastefully. I would still say, hey, look, like I have an offer to go back, but I'm really interested and excited about this place. And sort of, I just kind of, that's sort of would be my pitch. Honestly, if there's a specific question I can answer, but I wouldn't stress about it. It's totally part of the game. Just don't do it in a very outlandish, like, oh, look at me doing all this stuff kind of way. But if there's a specific group of firms that you're interested in, absolutely go after that and just say, hey, look, they're here. I wanted to kind of see how it happens and kind of see what happens. It's not like someone else is going to really like, call you out on or anything like that. So I wouldn't stress about that as much. But if you have more specific questions, you're welcome to reach out, okay, afterwards, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let's keep going. 1 second, guys. Okay, so let's go to interviews really quickly because I think we covered networking. I think we're gonna do interviews next, and then I don't know that we'll see how we go. We're doing on time. So interviews. All right, so there's three main types of interviews. One is behavioral, one is situational fit, and then one is or behavioral situational, one is sort of fit character, and then one is technical. And then there's a third 3B, which is markets. I'll get to all those in a second. So, okay, imagine now you've done all your networking, you have these interviews, et cetera. What are these interviews like? So we polled like 100 of our bankers in the last few weeks, and we were like, hey, what are the most common interview questions that you guys are asking? And sort of this is a version of that list. So the first one, the most important one probably, is the tell me about yourself question. So really for everyone here, perfect your 90-second pitch. This sort of sets the stage, sets the tone for the rest of your interview. And so really, really important, to do that. I think the other thing I will say about this is, I'm trying to have you all answer 4 questions in this, right? So one is basically like, who are you, right? So what is your background? What are you like? What are your set of experiences? Number 2, why are you here, right? So why are you interviewing for Goldman, or why are you interviewing for investment banking? Number 3, like why will you be the best candidate? Sort of that, and then why, why this career choice for someone coming from your thing. So if you can answer all 4 of those questions in your why me or my 90-second pitch, then I think you are you're sort of golden. Then we're going to ask you about what are your strengths. So you're like, okay, great. Sahidi, you've told me how amazing you are. Now tell me, like, what are your strengths? So for all of the rest of these questions, I would implore you all to have 5 or 6 really good stories that would cross apply for all of these different examples. For instance, right? For what are your strengths? I want to hear about, hey, most of the time I will hear, I'm really good attention to detail. I have really good technical skills, and I'm a really good team player. Like if I've had 30 super days in a day, I will have heard that 27 times. So I'm like, okay, well, great. I've heard this 100 times already, but give me examples. So, hey, I'm a really strong team player because at my last internship, I was part of this team that I just joined and had to do X, Y, and Z, and this is what the client wanted, and we were able to get this done. So the strength of your examples really make or break your interview as it relates to behavioral and fit. And again, I want to make sure I emphasize that point. And then be able to delve into those examples, right? For instance, I will say, hey, great, you did this as part of that client team. Tell me about a challenge you ran into, or why did you do it this way? Or why did you not do it this way? Like, what did this client say? So be ready to go 2 or 3 levels deeper into any single example that you're talking about, right? So number 1, having good examples and structured. And number 2, being able to go into depth in those examples, really important. Obviously weaknesses. at Goldman, I remember we would ask, I would ask these questions like multiple ways. I'd say, all right, what is a weakness? What are some of your weaknesses? Then we'd ask, like, what is the feedback you've received, or how would you change about the way you worked, or what would others say are areas of improvement? So all of these are versions of that same question that I would sort of be, be prepared for. Again, you don't want to come out and say, hey, I'm not really the greatest, like I'm not the most detail oriented person. Like that is not a good answer for this job, right? But I think you kind of want to say things that show that you are like self-introspective, but at the same time are not like completely disqualifying you for that particular job. Then we'll ask you like, what are your proudest accomplishments, or like what, and then we get into sort of situational stuff, right? Like what is a working situation or challenges that's been different or difficult? What is a failure you've had? How we've handled conflict, et cetera, et cetera. So I think just be ready for some of those situational questions that I've talked about already. Examples are an MD comes to you, or two MDs come to you, and give you the same deadline. I need this model done by Friday. How would you handle that, right? How would you handle when you and your associate aren't getting along, or there's like a lot of like overlap in responsibility? So these are all situational questions that we're just testing your judgment and sort of your ability to sort of think on your feet on. There's a third and fourth piece here, which are finance and technical. Again, I'm not going to get into this as much here, because I think technicals are just one of those things that are check the box. They really don't make an interview. Like just because you had great technicals doesn't mean you're going to get the job. In fact, I'd say technicals account for like 25% of an interview. But it's so important to nail them, right? Because it could be the reason you don't get a job, right? So I think it's important to get to know your accounting, your enterprise value, your DCF, your valuation, your M&A analysis, your LBO analysis, all that stuff is all great. But more than that, I think we want to know why finance, like why banking, why will you be an analyst? What is your understanding of what does an analyst do? So that's part one. And part two is, what are you tracking the market? You come in and say, hey, what industry groups are you interested in? And Mana says, hey, I'm interested in tech. Then I'll be like, okay, well, tell me about 2 deals you've seen in tech that you think are interesting, right? So I think we just want to see that you're tracking the market and are able to speak about it. Again, we won't spend time on that. I don't think we'll have time to spend on this as much as well. So in the interest of time, let me pause here. Obviously, there's other stuff on PE and stuff that we may do at a different session, Manas. I don't think we have time to do all of that today. We did some PE stuff today. I think generally, maybe I'll just do one thing on PE for those that are interested. Can you guys see my screen? Can you see now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, cool. So I think PE, I talked about this a little bit, like what are the different factors in private equity? Someone asked about this, kind of, my first point is public versus private important, then make a distinction between private equity, growth equity, venture capital important, then large cap or middle market important, then emphasis on the role, right? Depending on the firm, you'll be sourcing, transaction, execution, portfolio management, or fundraising. So depending on the role, and then obviously other factors. So we'll get into this more on some of the private equity stuff that we talk about. But yeah, I think there was a couple questions in here about, I had questions on full-time timeline, for example. I know QR codes, the apps, I haven't seen full-time. Yeah, so can this person ping me offline? I will try to get you guys responses to some of these questions, just because I won't be doing them justice here. So any questions that we did not cover with the very few minutes that we have left, that folks would want to sort of address? Obviously, we try to cover banking, PE, networking, organization around that, general views on the process, interviews, and as well as sort of buy side. The one thing on the buy side stuff, I wouldn't stress about that as much, especially if you're second years. Look, there's a handful of firms that recruit for buy side, but you will still have that optionality if you go to a banking or consulting internship for the summer. So I think unless you have sort of, there's a handful of firms that do buy side recruiting, so you can go do that. But generally, I would say, you could sort of prioritize IB or management consulting, and then do buy side as and when that comes up. The interviews are largely the same, except you need to answer why private equity and not investment banking, obviously. So I think that's just sort of, and then there's also some more case-based questions on interviews, right? So they'll ask you like, what is the revenue of the Starbucks in Charlottesville, right? Every year. So you're just gonna have to like do more case study type questions that are more consulting-esque. So that's what I would say on the buy side interviews. One thing I will say, I will take a couple questions. I can stay for a couple more minutes afterwards. We ask all of our schools. I'll share a link to just a quick testimonial. If you had a good experience or learned stuff, you can feel free to write that you took this at UVA. If not, no worries. It just helps our team. But yeah, let me turn over to Manas. If there's other questions that people didn't have time to ask or wanted to ask or wanted me to address, I try to be as comprehensive as possible in the time that we had on all the different topics that I think are important for you guys. But yeah, feel free to ask me about anything that I did not touch on. While you guys do that, this is the testimonial link. So if you had a good experience, my team asks that you just put in that you took it at UVA and you can put it here. Okay, Manas, anything else you want me to touch on? So takeaways for you all, I think obviously do a great job in the recruiting process, but I think as far as generalized recruiting stuff, we'll send in a follow-up email with some of these resources, but this page will be where you can sign up for all the events that are coming up. So obviously we have this TCV event, which I think we're close to 450 people now. So just a lot of these are like our bankers. So don't feel the need to come to a growth equity event when you're a sophomore in college. Like the 400 people that you see here are all of our current bankers. So don't stress about this if you can't come on a Saturday or something like that. Our JP event and LionTree and some of the other firms that we have are going to be on this page as well. And then yeah, I think the only other thing to note is that we have a networking platform, which I know you guys don't have access to yet, but it's basically allows you to connect with other universities and other people at going to all these great firms, right? So let's say you're a sophomore and you have an offer at Houlihan, or you have an offer at Evercore or Goldman Sachs. It allows you to meet someone from, Stanford or from UPenn or from, Harvard, who also is going to those firms or is also going to healthcare private equity and stuff. So we have like over 2,000 sort of meetings that we've done over the last couple months. So it's just something cool that I think our people really have enjoyed, kind of building their own network outside of their particular school. So we'll open that up to UVA, Manas. You and I can figure out how to roll that out given the waitlist stuff. But you'll hear about that. That's called Finect. It's just a cool networking platform that I think everyone's really liking so far. So we'll try to open that up for UVA as well. Okay, Justin, I'll take your question and then we will end the session. Go ahead, Justin.
Awesome. Yeah. So first of all, sorry that my screen is off. I'm actually at work right now and I'm not supposed to be on my phone. So but first of all, thank you for your time, like just coming out here at 7 p.m. just just educating. I really appreciate it. I know you mentioned you didn't want to touch on consulting, but I was just curious to know because you mentioned you have to show demonstrated interest in finance, and obviously if you're in banking, you have that advantage over someone that's in consulting. So I was wondering you got any advice for someone who's in that consulting track when it comes to say building those either skills or experiences when it comes to the resume screenings and things to talk about in interviews and stuff.
Yeah, can you just reach out to me offline? I may not be able to do this thing full justice. So if we have, I'll try to give you more info on generally on consulting. And when you say consulting track, look, I would say about when we work with a lot of the growth equity firms and private equity to an extent, they're looking for especially firms that have a lot more of an operational focus. So think about Hellman Friedman or think about some of these firms out there. They're looking for ex-consultants as much as they're looking for bankers, right? So I think if you are on the consulting track, I think that you got to understand that your skill set is going to be more around strategy, operations, and actually portfolio company management and understanding of industries versus hardcore just deal experience. But also understand that the banker that's coming in is not going to have that strategy, operations, and all that other skill set that we're talking about, right? So I think it's imperative on all of our candidates here to present the skills that they are bringing to the table based on the experience that they have, and then show a way for you. It's easier to build corporate finance skills, right? You could just say, hey, I took this training, or I did this at UVA, or I did blah blah blah, or in consulting I got this experience on an M&A side. Again, today's day and age, we're seeing less and less emphasis on you have to go into banking to go into PE. I think it's helpful, especially at the mega fund level, but there's a lot of firms that look at consultants as well, as sort of our growth equity firms. Pretty much all of them love consultants, right? Warburg, H&F, all the firms that I kind of alluded to earlier, they love consultants. So I think I think it's just you at the end of the day, right? So you have some experiences, you don't have some experiences, you just should present them in the right way. Okay, so that would be my advice. But if you have follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay, guys, I think we're past now a few minutes, so I'm sort of late for my next meeting. But I think hopefully the session has been helpful. I appreciate all the great feedback that people are given. This is the thing for the review, the testimonial. Oh, I pasted the wrong thing. So here's that. And then I know if you have further questions or just want to connect, like I said, I'm happy to connect with you guys on LinkedIn. And so here's a session. So, or my LinkedIn thing. So I'll paste this as well. And Manas, I will share or I'll have our team will share the recording. And if the slides are helpful, I can share those as well. But Manas, I'll turn it over to you for now.
Yeah, thanks, Kaushik, for the session. And yeah, everybody, like, we'll send out info about any future Elevate events. The ones with JP and Lion Tree. Reach out to me if you want a recording of this, or just the slides, and we'll get that to you. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me or Kaushik with any questions you have, and we'll try our best to get them answered.
I think we look forward to work with UVA. Thank you guys for setting this up. I think, obviously, I think the UVA has amazing candidates, even though like perhaps the career interest in these careers is maybe lower than some of the other schools, but that still means that there's a lot of interested people in here who would benefit from a lot of the sort of networks and opportunities. So definitely get involved. I think there's 4 or 5 clubs now that I think we want to work with. So, or you guys want us to work with. So I think I'm happy to bring you all in the fold, and yeah, just get involved, and it's a career-long journey, guys, and girls and women here. Like, it's not something that you have to put so much pressure on yourself, but at every step of the way, get the best possible thing for you. Just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean it's the right decision for you. Make sure it's the right decision for you. And then once you're there, you have to then do a really good job, right? Just like getting to UVA for a lot of you was a goal. And then now you realize you come to UVA, it's just sort of a platform to do the next thing, right? So make sure you treat everything like that. And it's a long journey. And the only thing that's important in your career is your network capital, like nothing else. Like I cannot stress this enough. So just keep building your networks. And it will help you. The people that have outside success in their careers are the ones that have the strongest network. So it's not how much money you're making out of undergrad or what firm you go to. It's how you leverage your networks and how you continue to build on it. I putting it on stone right now, and you'll tell me in 10 years that that's true, that is the most important thing. So anyway, with that, I will wish you all the best of luck in the process. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, get involved, get engaged. And yeah, good luck here. And we'll look to see you guys successful next year, through the process. So good night, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Kaushik.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Yep.